There's a wave across the land. We are moving, moving. It takes one step, it takes your voice, it takes your voice saying, I am not hearing if you are not naming it. I am not stopping if you are not changing it. Here are my hands, let's see what they're making. In the morning, in the rise up, there's a bridge from all that's been in the dawning. The vines are pushing through the pavement. We were born of burning hearts. We are tearing off the reins. From the ground up we will build it. From the clouds above we'll rain it. From the crowd up we will raise it. From the ground up.
I'm Nisha Moodley, and this is Devotion, the podcast about showing up in new ways to weave a new world together. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Devotion Podcast, episode 5. I had the beautiful opportunity to sit down with my friend Shawnrey Notto, who calls herself the Quirky Queen. And Shawnrey guides women to reclaim and embody self-love, pleasure, and joy so they can show up powerfully and uniquely themselves. And Shawnrey's work is incredible. I have experienced it firsthand several times. And she blends 15 years of dance and performance art with sensual intimacy coaching and mindfulness practices. And the result is that her work is deeply dynamic and interactive and really invites participants to explore their range in beautiful and safe spaces and allowing the body to unwind and start to heal cycles of shame and suppression. So in our conversation, we have a bit of a meandering exploration on how sameness and difference can create safety and growth, and we muse on when to know what's most nourishing for us. And the tension and the medicine of belonging and the difference between belonging and fitting in. And Shawnrey shares a little bit about her experience of not fitting in and how that has shaped her and shaped her work. And we talk also about how to create safety in our bodies in an unsafe world and why that matters. And we get a little window into some of Shawnrey's fascinating life experiences, really, that have shaped her work and her understanding for the deep importance and power of pleasure. So thank you for being here, and please enjoy this conversation with my friend Shawnrey Notto. Hi, Shawnrey.
Hi, Nisha.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm glad we get to hang out today virtually.
Yeah, me too.
Well, before I started recording, I asked you what would be a nourishing way to start. And so you mentioned a grounding meditation, and maybe we can do that now. And everyone who's listening, you can just join along with us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Nisha. Mm-hmm. I like to do this because I want to be able to be in my body and in my heart instead of in all of the chaos and fear and nervousness in my head. Mm-hmm. So I'm just going to start off with just letting out that last breath that we had. And then breathing in deeply. And slowly letting it out. And every time we breathe in, just to feel the coolness of the air as it enters your nose, down your throat, into your lungs and belly. And exhaling from your belly, your lungs, out your throat and nose. I'm going to do this 2 more times. And just really feeling the beautiful nourishment of that cool air as it comes inside of our bodies. As we exhale, we are also exhaling our essence. a little bit of us we put out into the world. So another deep breath in, filling up with cool, nourishing, soothing air. And exhaling, warmth and the essence of us. Yeah, it's very simple like that.
So easy to forget, for me anyways, how simple it can be. Just breathing. It's not always simple, but I think often and I'm sure many people can relate, like, what do I need to do to feel more grounded?
Yeah.
And yet I ask that without having taken a deep breath consciously in who knows how long.
What do I need to do in order to be grounded?
I need to go to yoga. I mean, maybe that too, but
I've definitely seen and heard people not breathe in a yoga class. It's quite frightening. When the breath finally does come, it's this very, catapulting, red-faced growling of a wow.
That one's been held in for a while. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. That was sweet and beautiful. I remember you leading a group of us before in just breathing, sensual breathing practice, really, and recognizing that the in-breath, the inhale, is cooler and drier, and then that exhale being warmer and wetter, and that stuck with me. And so, so I wanted to say it because it's just brought an extra dimension of awareness to that intentional, we're breathing all the time, but bringing awareness to the breath, that's brought another dimension of awareness to it, which is really beautiful for me. So maybe a few people will have the same experience.
Yeah, I hope so.
Well, I love to just start us off with another layer of grounding by acknowledging the land that we're on. And so I'm curious about what you can share about the land that you are on right now and just your relationship with this land.
So right now I am on the land. It's called now Oakland, and I'm specifically right on Lake Merritt, which is and was the wetlands of where the Ohlone people lived, fished, hunted, gathered, and yeah, right. That's where the indigenous people's land, and I have lived here in this particular area. I've just lived here for 1 year in the greater San Francisco Bay Ohlone people land. I've lived for almost 12 years.
Where were you before?
Before I lived in Southern California. I don't know the name of the tribe there. I hadn't studied then the names of the tribes. And yeah, I've lived in many places actually in the States. And in Arkansas, the Pulaski tribe. And in like the Ozarks, and yeah.
And that's where you grew up, is that right?
Middle school and high school.
Middle school and high school. Yeah, I wanted to ask you a little bit, if you're open to sharing about how you identify, whatever that means to you. What are some of the ways that you identify? And I know that you've moved around a lot, and so I'm curious about how that movement, as well as the ways that you identify, have shaped the ways that you move in the world. This is a huge
Mm.
question, so please feel
Yeah.
free to take your time, because I'm we're so shaped by who we are, and
Absolutely.
by how who we are gets related to by others, and that is just based on place as well. So yeah,
Hmm.
anyways, I'll stop talking now, but I'm curious for you to share about your identities and
Yeah.
how your life and identities have shaped the way that you move. Mm.
Okay. Well, my identities. My pronouns are she, her. I identify as a Black woman, sometimes African American, other times Black. I'm not married to any of those terms, and I am the daughter of Deirdre, the granddaughter of Cleo and Ava, and I how my identity was formed was my family. Starting off with my mother was in the military, so it was just my mom and I. I've been traveling since the womb. I've been traveling since I've been conceived, and so from the very beginning, I lived in many different places in the States and abroad, and in that, I experienced um, a lot of different cultures, different ways of seeing how families can be structured. Um, and also being in the military, there's like a military culture, and you always see a bunch of people who are mixed, and then we are, all of us are expatriates. And so we are Americans living in different areas. Um, and so personally, in terms of even identifying as Black, I didn't identify as Black until much later, because I'd never heard it. I'd always, I'd been bouncing around. And then I heard that term when I was 11, and it moved to Arkansas. And it was the first time someone had called me Black. And I remember being very confused because at that point I was very literal in my descriptions of people and
Mm.
descriptions of myself. And so when they said that I was Black, I said, "No, I'm not. I'm Hershey's chocolate," because that was, that was to me when I just figured that they were describing my skin color. And so all of those things definitely affect how I do identify, how I do walk around in the world. It's my history, as well as not only was I traveling around a lot as a child, we also always went back to either Arkansas or Louisiana, where my extended family was. So no matter what, wherever we were, we always came back to the South. And so as a part of me that felt both, like the world traveler, seeing a bunch of different things, a bunch of different ways of living, and then also very grounded in family and tradition in the South.
Mm. Thank you for sharing that. Mm. Something that I really admire about you, I think is the word that's coming to me. Something that I really admire, appreciate, learn from just by, being in your presence, is you express such range. And at least to me, anyways, it looks like a free expression of range, and I've seen your sadness, I've seen your silliness, I've seen your, sensuality. I've seen so many different sides of you, and obviously not the depth of every single side, because who's seen the depths of all of our sides. So I don't mean to imply that that I've witnessed every facet of you, but just that I've seen you embody so much range. And I'm curious for you if that feels really, and maybe it's not an either or, but I'll ask a clunky question and see what comes up. But
Mhm.
if it feels for you more innate, like that comes naturally or innately to you to express that range, how much is it that, and how much is it that something that you really work for in your life?
For me, let me see my range of expression. It's a really funny and interesting question because in many ways that is me. My mom told me that my mom is a self-professed, quiet, shy woman. She told me actually that she was afraid that when she had me, she wanted to have me, she chose to have me, but she was also afraid because she knew that she was very quiet and she was afraid that I wouldn't learn how to talk. Then I came
Oh,
about. Yeah, I came about and I was just really like, she said, "You're very big and you said hello to everyone and you smiled to everyone and you would go over to people and say, and point to me and say, that's the mama, that's the mama." And she said, "You're just so different from me. I was very quiet and sullen and you were very open and bright." And, so that later on, I think I forgot that. I mean, that when I feel like I would feel shy. I was I was a quiet person, at least at school, but then at home I would be loud. So I think that my expression has always been just a little bit all over the place. Like I'm definitely very connected to my feelings and to expressing them. And then also, I can be quite shy with people I don't know. And my mom would, my family actually, they always say that I am, up. They say, we just shake our head and say, "Up, there goes Shawnrey again. She's doing, she's there." That's the Shawnrey thing. And so I think in my family, they just always see me. They've always seen me as like, this big, loud, just kind of weird person. I love to hug. I love to, make games and act silly. I mean, I have like no shame with just, with making people, is wanting to express and be with people. And it's funny because my family, at least my mom's side of the family, which is what I grew up with, they tend to be, at least my mom, my brother, and my sister, they tended to be much more quiet and not as huggy. And so I always wanted to hug. I was always looking at people, and then but then it would just be like met with like, what's wrong with you? What are you what are you doing?
mm,
And I remember one time, this is, I was just looking at my mom because I just like to look at her. I just like to look at people. I love to look at people. I'm not staring. I'm just absorbing them and just, it's just really interesting. And she said, "Stop looking at me. What are you staring at?" And my grandmother said, don't talk to that girl like that. She's just loving you with her eyes." And I was like, yeah, that's exactly what's
mm.
happening.
Oh, thank you, Grandma,
Yep.
for seeing me.
Yep.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, it sounds like so much of it for you is just like an imprint of who you are, that vastness of expression. And um, yeah, it's something that I've noticed because I've come to workshops of yours before and noticed, because it's rare, actually, right? And I think sometimes when we see something that's rare, we notice it more.
Mm.
Um, I really noticed how diverse your groups are, age, shape, um, race. I mean, so much diversity that I experienced in the space, in your spaces. And I'm curious if you could speak a little bit to why you think that exists for you. And I think also just how do you have that be a nourishing space for the people that are present? Diverse spaces aren't inherently nourishing spaces.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm curious about why you think that's been the case for you, and what you think helps to make those spaces mutually nourishing for the folks present.
Mm-hmm. That's a beautiful question. Um, so I'll first say I love my diverse spaces. It makes me so happy. I'm like, wow, all the different people, and whether they're, yes, I love diverse spaces. And one thing I honestly think, one way I think that it happens is because I was always more of an outcast person. I was always a little bit the oddball out, just growing up. And so I think energetically, I learned to not exactly, it's not fit in because I didn't fit in. I just learned to be myself in different places and see people where they were, where they are. So wherever I was, like, and this can start with in school. I remember going to middle school, and I would hang out with all the misfits and the oddballs, all the goth kids and the kids that were outcast. But then I also did theater, and so then I was with the theater kids, and then also I was an athlete, and I love, so I did all the athlete stuff, and then I was academic, and so I was with academic people, and for me, these were and then I'm a black woman. And so that, so there's all of that as well. And then, so all of these, I always was very adamant about, I'm putting this in quotes, being myself, no matter where I was, and hearing people, listening to people and where they are. I don't tend to put judgment on where people are coming from and what they're doing, because I know that there are so many ways, that there are so many truths that exist in our world. I mean, I traveled around too much and saw too many family configurations, too many ways of being to create one truth and one way of being in my heart. And so I think that that also shows up in my interactions. And so when people speak to me and when I talk to them, I don't know if maybe they feel it energetically, or if there's something that, I don't know, if there's like a way that I'm speaking that that gives permission, or allows people to be able to be themselves and know that it's not going to be judged, and going to be able to see, and the nuance of who they are in their existence is going to be seen and appreciated. And I think that that's what happens in the spaces that I am in. Like, I'm just so myself
Mm-hmm.
that it gives other people permission to be themselves. And myself, like, I really want that. Like, my greatest joy is for people to feel comfortable in expressing who they are and how they are. um, and that, I guess, that comes out in anything that I am leading or speaking in. And then, when it gets to deeper, more intimate, diverse spaces, the same thing happens. There is, I really make sure, and tell people that this is a safe space to explore. It's like, a safe enough space to explore. And so we've created a foundation of a laboratory, if you will, of exploration, of climbing and falling and saying things wrong and making a mistake and having an insight and crying. And so I'm like, all of that is valid, because, we're learning, and we're here to we're here to witness you in your learning, to be supportive in your learning. And so when that means whenever people share, they're like, okay, cool. It's okay for me to say it wrong. I'm gonna put it in quotes, say it wrong, to do it wrong. Because here, quote, wrongness is okay.
Mm. It's really beautiful. And, a couple things that are coming up as you're sharing that it's making me reflect on. One, just recognizing for myself that when I'm holding a space or hosting a space, if I'm holding tension in my body, especially if we're talking about or exploring something that has historically created tension, it's like something
Mhm.
you don't want to talk about on Facebook
Right.
for a reason. Or you do,
Uh-huh.
but be prepared to clear your afternoon for the fight.
Right.
Um, so when topics come up, and we had one in our space actually just recently talking about and exploring, in one of our group spaces, this pandemic and, civil liberties and masks and all those things.
Mhm.
And I noticed for myself often because I'm sort of I want to say inherently, but I don't think that I was born this way. I think it was just deeply, rooted over years and years and years. But there's a deep part of me that's very conflict averse. It's something that I don't have to put in effort to not create conflict as much as I need to put in effort to allow for it. To allow
Mhm.
for dissonance, let's say,
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
discomfort, to allow for discomfort. And and so what happens is automatically when there starts to be like, ooh, there's, especially a difference of perspective here, that what comes up in me is that discomfort. So I have to really, one reflection that I have as you're speaking is like, yes, when we're holding these spaces, it's so important for us to notice what's happening in our own bodies, and the discomfort, how we be with our own discomfort, um, because that contributes in a pretty significant way, especially if we're the one holding the space, to the the energetic tone, the emotional tone, and the feeling of safety in the room. Um,
Yeah,
mm,
absolutely. Yeah, for me, like one of the biggest things that helps with that is because I get the same thing, and I know when things are going down, when I start getting hot, my body will start sweating. I'm like, okay, here's the thing. And
mm,
what I do is, especially if someone brings something up, and let's say it's a complaint or whatever, I'm like, okay, that's where we're going. It's like, put the attention on that. It's not like, oh, we're gonna be laser looking at it, but acknowledge it. Totally acknowledge exactly what it is. I mean, I remember when I was teaching a group, there was a mix of folks, mix of genders, and I was doing something, and some cisgender man said, I don't remember exactly what he said. Somehow or another, he said I was doing it wrong, and I was like, okay, thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm human and I'm going to make mistakes. And I apologize for any of the things that I'm doing that rub you wrong. And I'm so happy that you spoke up about it, because now we can all speak up about times when we do feel uncomfortable, times when we do think something is wrong. And so I literally will, like, acknowledge it, thank them, and then we turn it into a discussion. When we turn
mm,
it into a discussion, we really, it brings the humanity back, it brings the connection back, it brings it brings ourselves back into the situation in a real way, and then it's like open. And when we have this openness, people are like, oh my gosh, okay, great, we've created a container for us to actually address the thing that was just said. Instead, I have no after leading so much and teaching so much, I have no attachment to trying to be right and, to be right and perfect at all. It never works. It feels weird. It makes the energy in the room weird. And as soon as I just like someone calls me out and I'm like, you know what? You're right. Or like, oh, you know what? I hear you. Let's all
Mm,
go there now.
mm, mm,
So that's always been, it feels good because then it takes all the responsibility off of me, because I don't have all the answers. I don't know all the things, and everyone else has so much to offer, and it's just, I don't know. It's a dissipating of it. It creates conversation. It creates dialogue. It creates creativity, and then afterwards, after people have talked, then we can come back together and be like, okay, how was that? How was that entire process? How was it to have it be called out? How was it to for me to acknowledge it? How was it to discuss it amongst yourselves with each other? How is it now to come back together and to bring in, the body sensations, and to honor the arc of emotions and the arc of, and the arc of our beingness with each other. And then it makes it normal, makes it much more normal, and everyone can take responsibility and create from there.
mm, mm. Yeah, one thread that I'm hearing you share about is just feeling the sensations of the body. I mean, you named that for you, it's when you feel your body get really hot. And I imagine it's different cues or things for different people, and maybe even at different times, different cues from the body.
Hmm.
But just noticing what that, oh, we're going there sensation is in the body, when we're holding space, when we're in space. Um, and and then going there, and I'm really, it's interesting because when you're talking about going there with conversation and that opens something, it makes me think about how it's the same way with sensation.
Mm.
When we're contracting against a sensation and when we're relating to the sensation with a mental narrative versus just being in it, which is moving into and towards the sensation, we can actually open into the sensation. This is something that I really experienced during labor. It was like
Mm.
2 hours of trying to get on top of the sensation. The way that I described it later when Noah said, what was labor like for you? And I was like, I don't know how to answer that question. And I thought, okay, well, how can I, he really wants to know. And, okay, let me see if I can find some words to express this. And I said the first few hours felt like I was trying to surf the wave. Like I was trying to get on top of the wave and surf it. Basically the waves of sensation would come and I'm trying to get on top of them and ride them out. And I just kept getting pummeled. I just kept getting completely thrashed, kind of to use the surfing analogy, like I would get thrashed onto the shore and, completely, under the water and then have to try again until finally at some point I went into the wave, like the equivalent of a big wave is coming. And instead of trying to surf it, I'm going to go into and under the wave. And then so basically going into the sensation and it would just wash through my body. And I can't say that I had an ecstatic birth or that it felt deeply pleasurable, but I was with it. It was
Yeah.
very much more primal. I mean, I was suffering for 2 hours and then I was dancing with it. And
Mm.
sometimes the dance was a struggle and sometimes there was grace, but there was a sort of an overall like, okay, I figured out how to be with this and not just fight it.
Mm.
What
Mm.
looked like I was trying to work with it, but really what I was doing was fighting it.
Mhm.
By
Oh,
kind of trying to
absolutely.
dominate the sensation. And I think that's sometimes what happens with our discomfort, where an uncomfortable topic gets brought up or an uncomfortable sensation is happening and we try to dominate it by getting away from it,
Yeah.
by fighting it, um, instead of going into it. And there's probably a lot more nuance to bring, and every situation is different, but that was coming up as you were sharing.
Yeah, that's so real. The the sensation, the idea of going into the thing, going towards the thing. I call it honoring what is. We can only, I feel like the only way we can really have any type of change or any transformation is to first be really present with what is. Um, and there is it's, and I don't know, it's in some ways, it's like, it's a slowing down. It's and like you said, it's like swimming into, and it's not this direct, like I'm shooting an arrow piercing into it. It's something that's much uh, softer.
Mm. Mm. That's beautiful. A question that I've been sitting with a lot lately, I'm curious to hear your take on it or your reflections on it, is that sometimes that difference feels really confronting, and it's very nourishing to not be with it. For example, creating a space that is, a women only space, for example, or a space with kind of like minded people, let's say. And I can see how, you know, understandably, so many of us may feel less safe in particular spaces. And yeah, I'm curious how you navigate um, what kind of difference to invite into spaces in the first place. I'm sort of forming this question as I'm speaking it, but
Uh-huh.
yeah, I guess the question is like how to know when limiting that difference or diversity helps to create more safety in the space, more psychological safety or a sense of physical safety to open up, versus when do you decide, well, actually, it's valuable to allow for the tension that difference brings.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Hmm. Well, one thing that's interesting is w- with the things that I create, I think one way um, that similarities and creating a space of more just there's like there's sameness here, and there's like comfort in knowing that people are coming kind of coming from the same place,
Mm,
comes from initially the initial philosophy, just just your words, like how and what people are resonating with. And so that it's like a very simple answer, but then going deeper, um when I'm leading a group and there's let's say it's all women. So
mhm,
first of all, I that just knowing that there is a shared understanding, a shared feeling of being in being in this body and these kinds of bodies that have been perceived out in the world in a certain way. Now, once again, that then you'll start, then the difference will be in, the colors of the bodies and the shapes of the bodies and the cultures of the bodies, and, which all add different flavors and different experiences and different truths, if you will. Um, and so in that, how does that feel? I'm just gonna share something that I learned about yesterday. It was really interesting, and I don't know if well, this will just show like my limitations.
mm,
I saw I follow Your Body Is Not an Apology on Instagram, And I
Mm.
saw a woman who had done a selfie, and she talked about chub rub. And she's a dark skinned woman. And she said that chub, she's like, oh, I'd had a whole bunch of shame about this. And what it is, she had like darker pigmentation on her inner thighs. And and then all these women started chiming in, being like, "Oh my God, I'm so happy that you said this." That's something that I experience as well, and other people don't talk about it. This is something that brown and black women who are bigger, who are chubby, who are more full bodied can experience. And I remember I was like, "Wow, I never knew that existed, because that my body doesn't do that, at least in that area, and I
Mm.
didn't know it was a thing. And if someone would have needed me to be able to hold space, specifically for that, I would have been like, oh, I had no idea that this was an experience for you. Um, and and then for me, then I was like, wow, it's just so it just made me honor so much more, the diversity of leadership, and how we totally need just more women, let's say, for like doing like what I do, and being embodied and sharing their stories, because the more and more the stories get shared, the more and more the stories are allowed to be in the public. And then with that, then we can enter into spaces of diversity, and also knowing that the diversity is okay. I think sometimes I feel that so much of our experiences can be secretive, or made secret, or in the shadows, or held very, very closely to our hearts, in order to protect us. Because, if someone else sees that difference, then we're not going to feel like we're included. I also think that what this does is, um, there's not there's not more conversation, more dialogue, more awareness that is happening, so that we can, so that I can open up space in my heart and in my body for various experiences of being in the body, for various experiences of being in the world. Um, and so that was just really, when you're speaking about, again, bringing it back to, um, feeling comfortable, and, like, let's say we're in all women, or all brown women, or all black women, or all trans women. um, those In every one of those groups, there we have a like I will have a portion of me that belongs in each of those groups. And I find that I feel the most comfortable I feel the most comfortable in the groups of which I overtly identify with more.
Mm.
Um, and so, um, and so personally, in terms of, like, I'm a Black woman, I actually personally identify more with other Black women who also felt ostracized and on the outside, and not, quote, Black enough. That there is a way of, in our community of being Black, there's a way that you can be Black in the right way. And then there's a way that's outside of that, where you don't, where you just, where, our culture is like, oh, that's weird. But then there's a contingency now of the quote unquote weird Black kids. And so we get both, so we can talk about things, in ways that is both Black, being included in Blackness, and being, not excluded, but just like weird in our Blackness.
Mm.
So that's a really roundabout answer.
Yeah,
I
I
don't know
mean,
if I
I'm so grateful for your words, and such a like rich exploration, and ask the question knowing that it's a messy space to explore and not at all straightforward. And I'm grateful to like be in the messy exploration. And for me, it's definitely an ongoing exploration of like, yeah, when we create identity groups, like women entrepreneurs, South Asian, um, women unpacking anti-Blackness, like these are all identity groups, but even within our identity groups, there's difference. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think holding that, I guess there are a couple of things that are coming up, like for me, which is, what is a container that we can step into if the aim is to unfold, let's say that I'm coming into a space and I'm looking to explore a deeper level of embodiment, sensual embodiment, and greater range of my sensual self-expression, like being in my body. I can see how being in a space with other women, well, I should say for me, specifically with not cis men, especially not cis hetero men, I should say,
Mm-hmm.
um, gives me a sense of like, okay, I can exhale a little bit more just coming into the space.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's just me. It might be different for someone else, what our capacity is based on the work that we're there to do at
Right.
this time. But also then, can we hold that even in this space where we might hold that there's some sameness, that there is still difference here?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
that feels really
absolutely.
important. Otherwise, we come together to find ourselves and then erase ourselves in the process if we don't allow
Mm-hmm.
for and see and
Yeah.
make some space for the difference that's already there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm,
Yeah. And one thing that's really, for me, that's really beautiful about being in, let's say, a diverse group of women, um, especially if, like, it's just like, if it's something that you can see, because once again, there's like all the diversity things that we cannot see that can only come out
right.
in our stories or if we feel safe enough to share. Um, is that even in, if a group comes together and they see that they're all different in some ways. In some ways, it is already opening up the expectation of this is going to be a little bit different. So
Mm,
so there's like a hmm, let's see, and especially when you have multiple people who don't look the same. So when you have all the different, different skin colors and different body types, you have multiple uh,
expressions of difference, kind
expressions,
of.
exactly.
Yeah. Mhm.
And so with that, it's not like oftentimes I'll be like the one person, the one Black woman. That's a very different feeling, in a big group and just being one Black woman as opposed to a smaller group and like of a group of, let's say, 12 people, we have I don't know how many different, nationalities and sizes. It's like it's almost like, a quarter of this, a third that, like it's all mixed up.
Mm.
And so then there's more comfort in a different way. There's more comfort in a different way than when, let's say, you're in a group of all brown women. And it's like then there's like I feel like there's like different parts of us when the container is created in a safe way. There's different parts of us that really get more of the healing or get healing in a different kind of way. So if I had a group and it was all Black women, the stories that would have come up would be are in our def and will be definitely different than in a group. If I had, then the group of, Latina and Asian and Jewish and, all of that. And so, and these are not invalid experiences, um, but they do allow for, or they can be an opportunity to bring up different parts of ourselves because we can't help but like look at, we can't help. We're humans. We're looking at each other and kind of, if not comparing, just being like, huh, that looks like this and sounds like that. And how does that, how does that compare? Not, how does that compare to me? What is that story in juxtaposition or interfacing with mine? Um, and so I find that really valuable. And also it's really complex. It's really complex
Mm.
because like in, the class that I was teaching was about like people came there for loving their bodies, self-love, sensuality, boom, pleasure. And then COVID and Black Lives Matter. And all of a sudden I had, we were having conversations with a bunch of people experiencing the world, like similar things in the world, and experiencing them differently in their bodies and having different questions come up.
Mm.
And, for me in that case, I was like, you know what? I can't pretend this away. This is not going to be a space where it's just like, we're just going to talk about sensuality in our bodies and, in a vacuum away from the world. It's like, no, everything out in the world is impacting this body that you live in right now. And you are bringing that body into this group. And this whole group has has like a whole plethora of experiences that are, that are linked back and back and back, not only to this world that we're living in, but then also back to all of our cultures and our ancestors. And so I'm going to honor that as best I can and say it, bring it to the conversation, be like, yes, you
Mm.
are a blonde, blue haired body and you've grown up in the States. And yes, you are a bigger Latina body that has grown up in this space. And yes, you are, all of, and just bringing that in to the space, acknowledging it and acknowledging that we are in this group that has all of these different experiences happening. Um, let's, let's, let's see what is the richness, what is the gift, what is the thing that we're here to learn, to listen to grow into, to expand into. Because even if we are in a group of women, let's say, who we all technically had the same background, then we have like, then there's like a whole other, there are other differences that we have to unpack, to get the gifts from, to look deeper into.
Mm. Hmm. Yes. Theme that just keeps coming up is like going into the intensity, moving into the discomfort. And it's bringing up this question for me around safety
Mm,
and embodiment.
mm,
And I've heard a couple of people express lately some version of this idea that asking people to be regulated, to have a regulated nervous system, to be in their bodies, to maybe access pleasure in a dysfunctional or unsafe world is like asking them to bypass their um, primal instincts in a way, or
mm,
bypass, And I've been sitting with that because I'm like, okay, I hear that. I hear that. And also, I recognize that if we're all kind of running around dysregulated, you know, I think that it actually makes it harder for us to access our intuition. I think if we're super dysregulated, there isn't the deepest intimacy with self necessarily. How do we create intimacy with one another? Which then maybe brings up questions around trauma bonding. That's a whole much deeper exploration. But like, I'm really curious to hear your thoughts about feeling safe in our bodies in an unsafe world. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that any of us is going to be able to like be breathing so deeply when we're in the middle of, having rubber bullets shot at us and tear gas and, like front lines. But just walking through this world or navigating life, creating safety in the body. Is that even a thing in an unsafe world?
mhm,
And what's the value of it if you see a value in that, creating safety and Yeah, just this exploration into safety in the body and pleasure, and the role of safety in the body and pleasure in a world that feels, in many ways, for many people, unsafe.
Yeah, absolutely. This this brings me back to one of the first, well, when I really learned how important it is to be able to have a space, um, and it's not like literally, a space, but to have a space and somewhere to have permission, um, to feel a sense of sovereignty, as much of a sense of sovereignty in your own body.
Mm.
And that is that's huge. I really learned this when I was in two places actually. The most profound place was when I was teaching. I was teaching and volunteering in Liberia, and Liberia they had just finished their years long civil war, and there was just horrific everything. I mean, there's nothing. People lived through generations of not being safe, and and not being regulated, running for their lives literally all the
Mm.
time. And I was teaching movement, breathing, mix of movement, dance, and yoga for everybody. So there was women, there was old men, there was kids, and I just led them through some very basic movements of reaching arms up into the air, opening up wide, taking a deep breath in and opening up your heart. And, just little movements with like music and lots of open and stretching. And people literally had tears in their eyes. And I remember one young woman said, "Oh, oh, I feel my body. Oh, it feels so good to feel my body." And it was just said with such exaltation and joy and groundedness and appreciation. And it was because there was a moment where she just really was able to open up, stretch wide, take a deep breath, and just be with her body.
Mm.
And that is essentially like why I teach what I teach and how I teach it. It's because the world, there is so much happening, and there and in other people, other places, there is always something terrible and scary and insane happening. And even within that, the biggest gift that we can always somewhere be able to give to ourselves is a moment or longer of celebration, of acknowledgement of our own bodies. Um, and I mean, this happened as well when I was teaching in Brazil, and I was working with young girls, and they were like they were teens, preteens, and teens, and they were also all homeless. And for them, doing the same thing, the same types of movements that lead them into exploring and feeling their own selves, into just laying down and knowing there's like a couple of moments of shavasana, just laying down after we've like moved and stretched and been in our own bodies and just laying down. They said that it was so good and so wonderful to be able to move their bodies just for them, and
Mm.
not at a party, not, around other people, not for other things, but it was just for them. And so when I'm teaching and, and when I'm looking out at the world and, making these different offerings about like, connect with your body, is connecting with sovereignty, because it is in some ways and sometimes that is the only thing that you can count on, is taking a moment to just feel your body. And I also want to acknowledge that people have experienced trauma in their bodies, or against their bodies, whether it's sexual or it is physical or it is, verbal. And yet there is always still a place, a time when we have experienced the joy of our bodies as sovereign expressions. And that is never taken away from us, period. I feel like every experience that we have in our bodies, every experience is there. And we can, and what I teach is what we can do is to take ourselves back to the cells, to the memory, to the cellular memory of our bodies, of those times when we have felt that freedom and expression and safety, and go into that and move from that place and remind our bodies that this too is possible.
Mm. As you're speaking, I see this, while we can't ask ourselves or expect ourselves or others to be regulated all the time in every place, in every space, because if we're in an unsafe space, there's a reason why we go into fight, flight, freeze, fawn, right? Those are protective mechanisms. And
Absolutely. They're smart. They're
they're
smart
smart. Yeah.
mechanisms.
The wisdom of our our bodies, our survival mechanisms of our bodies. And that's why when we need to run without thinking too much about it, our body kicks in and we run. And we run with energy that we wouldn't have if we were in another state. So, seeing that it's not possible everywhere all the time, and it's beautiful, powerful, and necessary for us to have spaces where we can unwind, where we can remember, that freedom, that embodied liberation, that, as you said, we've all had at least a moment of in this lifetime. Hopefully everyone, at least a moment of in our lifetime, and to have these spaces where we can remember, where there's enough safety for us in the space to let go even for just a moment. And I can see how the impact of that is that I imagine a possible, beautiful impact of that is that as we taste that, the freedom to be and to open to pleasure and pain, but to open in our bodies, that as we have those spaces, that perhaps we want more of that, and that might shift the sort of spaces that we choose to be in, and the sort of spaces that we aim to create, for others as well, and for ourselves and for our children, and the kind of world that we want to co-create together. So I'm just seeing, as you're saying this, the ripple effect of having these spaces, and not just for everyone else, but also just for us, for a moment of letting go. So that makes me want to ask you about unwind and slow grind. If you would share with us a little bit about what it is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Feels like one of those spaces.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so it's unwind and slow grind. It's literally what it is. It's unwinding our bodies, unwinding our this intertwining of mind, body, worry, world, and allowing it to unravel, to unentangle, so that then we can breathe
Mm.
and be with ourselves. In many ways, we we have our existence, we have our who we're being, and then all of everything in the world, like wind up around us, and then we end up getting really tight and really fearful, and then like constricted. And so unwinding, that is what that is. It's like it is unwinding in order to deepen, unwinding in order to clarify, because there is not a constriction around who we are and how we're being. And the slow grind is that nod and the acknowledgement of sensuality. Like when we slow down and take our time, it's like really digging deep into the pleasure of our own body. So unwinding and then slow grinding, being in our pleasure. This movement class is all about self love and pleasure in times of intensity and crisis,
Mm.
because that's usually the first thing to go,
Mm.
is pleasure. Because like, okay, we're going to fight, and we're going to flee, and we're going to fight some more, um and then we put our bodies, our nervous systems, in this constant constriction mode. And when we're constricted, it is so, as we said before, it's smart. It's smart. It's a smart body thing to do, but it also constricts other parts of us. It constricts our creativity, our
Yes.
diverse problem solving, our connection with ourselves, our connection with our families, our connection with our breath, our connection with our lives. The bigger, just like more creativity and bigger vision. And so that's what unwind and slow grind is, an offering to, to acknowledge the things that we are, the things that we've been experiencing it. And then also to bring us back into our bodies and pleasure, and to create or um, blow flames into, give life and air into that internal flame, that internal fire that we have, that internal fire of life that we have inside of us, that when we get too entwined and entangled in the outside world, then it can literally snuff our fire out. So that's what
Mm.
this is. And we got to go nice and slow. You can't be like, okay, I'm going to go right now and, we're going to get it done. It's like, no, you need to like, take your time
Mm.
with that, stoke that fire, give yourself that nourishment.
Mm. Well, I'm so excited for this movement workshop. And I actually just looked up this quote because I saw a quote the other day by Asada Shakur. And it made me think of you, and it made me think of your work. So I want to share it with you. She said, part of being a revolutionary is creating a vision that is more humane, that is more fun too, that is more loving. It's really working to create something beautiful. And, made me think of you and the role of pleasure, the role of opening in allowing for pleasure, the way of pleasure allowing for joy and creativity and movement and flow, and the way of that creativity opening the way for a vision for something more beautiful, and pathways to more beautiful relating. And also just a break from the intensity, not to bypass it, but to also say, and now we rest, and now we eat, and now we savor, and now we slow down, and now we enjoy. So we'll pop the information for Unwind and Slow Grind into the show notes so people can sign up if they want to. But I wanted to share that quote with you, Shawnrey, because it really made me think of you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. It's so perfect. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I have one more question for you before we go, which is I want to know, what does devotion mean to you? Because, of course, that's the name of the podcast. So what does devotion mean to you? And what is a place in your life right now where you are being stretched in your own devotion?
I love that. Devotion to me, what devotion is to me is a giving of myself over, a giving of my love, my energy, my attention in this. It's simultaneously grounded and rooted and exalting. There's an exaltation in it. And I feel that when there is devotion to whatever it is, like true devotion, there is something that is inherently nourishing. There's like an inherently nourishing cycle, because in order for me to truly be devoted to this thing, I also have to be nourishing myself, because I cannot give of myself if there is nothing to give.
Mm.
And so that is what devotion is. And where have I been stretched in devotion? Like stretched as in it's been difficult to be
Well, I would
devoted, or
love to
stretched as in like
know,
I'm.
yeah, like what's your edge right now in your devotion? Like where are you, what's your growing edge that you're on right now?
Honestly, my growing edge, I think it's constantly a growing edge, is my devotion to to honoring things as they are, to honoring myself as I am, to honoring, because the growth edge with that is I have an idea, and I can have ideas about where I should be and what I should be doing and how I should be showing up. And that is in contrast to the devotion to joy, into love, into self-acceptance. And there is a way that the edge of that is, how can I continue to bring love and acceptance and presence to me as I am right now, in who I am, and be in that, and then also stretch,
Mm.
as opposed to have those be separate entities, and here's like this thing that I want and how I want to be, and then this is how I am. No, like the devotion edge is like the continuous dance, the continuous like pulsing of, how can I be a yes to who I am and what is, and a yes to the things that I desire, to the things that I'm wanting, and am desiring to grow into being.
Oh, I just, if I didn't have all these things attached to me right now, like headphones and a microphone, I would just jump up and down because, yes, I think we so often try to change what is, let's say, change ourselves by rejecting ourselves instead of evolving through love and intimacy and wholeness.
Yeah, it's that diving, it's that going into the wave, going into the water thing again.
Full circle. Thank you, Shawnrey. I'm really excited about Unwind and Slow Grind. For anyone who signs up, I'll see you there. And thank you, Shawnrey. It's been beautiful to have a meandering chat with you today. I appreciate you
Yes.
so much.
Me too, Nisha. Thank you so much. It's so beautiful.
Hey, everybody. Before we go, at the end of my conversation with Shawnrey, we talked about her workshop, Unwind and Slow Grind, and I hope you'll join us. And we also talked about how this unwinding can make way for us to be clearer in our vision for our lives and for the world. So I want to invite you to join Shawnrey's workshop for sure, Unwind and Slow Grind, and then come and join me for a free workshop that I'm hosting called Embody Your Leadership, which is all about expanding your freedom to show up with vision and devotion. And you can sign up for free at embodyyourleadership.com. And in the workshop, we're going to talk about your own personal North Star, favorite tools of mine for working with anxiety and overwhelm, especially when I'm stepping up in bigger ways and when the world feels intense, and identifying some of the hangups that might be preventing you from seeing and honoring and giving your gifts fully. And then, of course, what to do about that. So you can join us at embodyyourleadership.com. Can't wait to see you there. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here, beloved. I want to extend my heartfelt invitation for you to join our podcast Inner Circle for free at devotionpodcast.com. You'll receive access to show notes and free bonuses, including my favorite guided meditation when you sign up. If you loved this episode, please share it, subscribe, and I'd be so grateful if you would leave a review. Our mixing and sound design is by Lou Janot, brand design by Neverland Studio, episode images by Liv Haddon, and our theme song is From the Ground Up by Ayla Nerio. Thank you all, and thank you so much for being here. I'm so grateful, and I'll talk to you soon.
We were born up in a clouds above, we're raining. From the crowd up, we were raising. From the ground up, we were building. From the clouds above, we're raining. From the crowd up, we were raising. From the ground up.